Good morning everyone and welcome to the Two-Headed Wolf Gaming channel, as today we're gonna be playing Last Epoch. And in today's episodes we're gonna be going for the Sentinel as a base class with an aim towards the Paladin mastery. At this point I had about a 5-minute long introduction sharing everything I wanted to do with the series, at the end of which I realized it is way too long for this video. We're here for the action, so I gathered all that information and threw it down in the description below. Of course, I'm going to be talking about everything that I'm doing as we're playing along the way. However, if you want the information from the start, or maybe you're curious about everything mid-series, there is a place where you'll find that information, down in the description below. Let's talk Sentinel. We'll take a look at the key skills that the game is showing us here from the start. These are not all the skills that the Sentinel has to offer, however it's giving you a pretty good idea of what to expect by playing this class. And we're not going to read through them either, as I think it's more fun to discover them in-game and try them out at that point, but I want us to take a look at the power scaling tags that we can see down at the bottom. If you don't know what these are, maybe you are new to the genre, these tags tell you which bonuses from certain passive skill points or items will apply to this particular skill. For example, if you find an item in game which says it increases the physical damage done by skills, you look at the warpath ability, you see it has the physical scaling tag, so you know that that bonus will apply to this particular skill. Or if you find an item in game which says it increases the area of effect for skills, you look at the warpath ability, you see that it has the area scaling tag, so that bonus will apply to the warpath ability. However, if we look at the javelin skill, for example, we can see that it has no area scaling tag, so the bonus will never apply to the javelin skill. This is how you can figure out what items within the game will empower the skills that you like to use, and thus you'll make better choices as you play further and further, as you push further into the end game especially. You'll find even better items and you'll know what to use in order to make yourself a really nice build. So let's take a look at the primary scaling tags for these skills. We have physical and melee, physical and melee, physical and throwing attack, physical and spell, physical and melee, and then once again physical and melee. So it's pretty much what you'd expect from a warrior, getting up close and personal into melee combat and dealing physical damage. Well, why is that important, you might ask? If we take a look at the Paladin mastery, which we're going for, and once again, we're not going to read through the skills, we'll discover them later on, but the scaling tags are spell and buff, spell and buff, spell and buff, fire and spell, and once again fire and spell. So we are moving from a melee fighter dealing physical damage into sort of a hybrid class, where we're gonna start casting spells, buffing up our characters, and dealing fire damage. This can be very useful information, as we might consider as we're leveling up our Sentinel that we want to build maybe a higher mana pool and get some mana regeneration so that we have enough to cast our spells when we're reaching the Paladin mastery. Or maybe we might consider building up a really high health pool so that when we get to the Paladin mastery we can buff up our character using heals and regeneration, and thus maximizing the investment that we've put early on and making a really tanky character. Or we might even consider saving up some of the items that we might find along the way that increase the fire damage that we are dealing, either by a flat amount or a certain percentage, and thus keeping those items in our stash or keeping those items in our inventory and throwing them in whenever we unlock the judgment or the smite spell, and thus maximizing that potential. This is useful information. Always take a quick look at what you plan to do, and I think it's going to help you make better choices as you are going through the game. With the setup done, here we are within the game. If we take a look down at the bottom, we start with a basic attack, which is going to be replaced immediately by the vengeance skills that we start with, which is a melee attack that also prepares you to riposte incoming hits. If vengeance successfully hits an enemy and you take a hit in the next 2 seconds, you riposte, taking 25% less damage and striking at a nearby enemy. It has 0 mana cost, so that's why I think it's perfect to replace our basic attack with. And this is a really good skill to begin with. getting that 25% damage mitigation until we find ourselves some better equipment, some better armor is really useful. Plus we're getting this extra attack whenever we're getting hit, and I feel like that makes this whole early area a whole lot smoother. I really think that the developers have put a lot of effort into making this starting area sort of a tutorial, that it's not actually telling you that it is a tutorial. And I think there are a few more instances where I can prove that the developers have put intentional thought into making this area an introductory one, especially for people who have never played a game like this before. But the game is looking so good. I've been following the development of this game for a very long time, being a fan of ARPGs in general. And to be honest, I didn't like it for a very long time. Early in the development, the developers were mostly focused on building gameplay system, which, fair game, I think that is a really good idea. And I think the graphics did not appeal to me. Like, taking a look at a few images, it wasn't what I wanted. And so for a very long time I haven't bought into the game until somewhere in April of 2023. That's when I bought into the early access. I think it's at that point that the developers have put out this major update where they've improved graphics, they've improved the gameplay, and I realized, okay, they're committed to this, they're doing this, I like where they're going, so I decided I'll give it a try. I bought the game in early access, I played with the druid for about 4 to 5 hours, at which point I stopped. I liked where the game was going, but I felt like it needed to stay on the shelf a little bit longer. I needed to let it cook so that I can give it a go when the full release is here, and I am happy with my choice. I think I've done the right thing. The graphics look a whole lot better, the gameplay feels smoother, so I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with this one. We've also leveled up, unlocking the Warpath ability, which spins towards the mouse while you hold down the ability key, striking nearby enemies as you move. So it's pretty much the Whirlwind ability which we've seen in Diablo 3 and Diablo 4. I don't remember seeing it in Diablo 2, but maybe I'm mistaken with that. I haven't played the Barbarian in Diablo 2 for a very long time, so let me know if that was the case. It's either that or the Cyclone ability which we've seen in Path of Exile. And here is where I believe we're getting another tutorial area. For the first time, I'm getting a mob which is perfect for the area of effects skill which we've just unlocked. You're actually unlocking before entering the cave. And then you get this tankier bear that survives for longer, so it gives you a chance to try out this skill for the very first time without taking a huge amount of damage. But then, as soon as you leave the cave for the very first time, you encounter that mob of squishy enemies, and it's allowing you, or in a way, it's showing you that, hey, this skill is actually really good at clearing mobs. I'm not gonna use it, I'm not gonna make a build around it, it's not something that I want to do for this run. We're gonna use it early on because I feel it's really good at clearing some of the squishier mobs. However, when we're fighting tougher enemies, we're gonna use our Vengeance skill to get that 25% damage reduction and thus help us survive for longer. Now the Warpath ability, even though I've compared it with Whirlwind or I compared it with Cyclone from Path of Exile, if you take how this skill developed in the later game, there are differences if you take Diablo versus Path of Exile versus last Epoch, the skills develop in a very unique way, and I think it's fun to play such an ability or such a build in all of these titles. We've leveled up again, unlocking Hammer Pro. I am getting a bit of lag in this area. I think there are a lot of effects happening and I have graphics mostly maximized. But it's not something that lasts, it's only for this area. If it happens more in the future, we will change it, we will take it down a notch. But as you can see, as soon as I left that area, everything is smooth once again. We have Hammer Throw here, which is a pretty interesting ability. We throw a hammer that returns to us after a short delay. Added throwing damage is applied to each hit at 105% effectiveness. This can be a very good attack, especially at reaching some of the backlines, you know, ranged attackers, mages, and because it's going in a line and returning, you are damaging even the melee attackers which are in front of you, so that's pretty good. We've also unlocked our very first passive skill points. We have the passive skill points here in the Sentinel tree, and as you can see, the mastery trees are a whole lot bigger. Insert joke here. Let's get back to our Sentinel for the moment. We've unlocked 3 skills that we can invest in. We can invest in Overwhelm, which adds physical damage to our melee attacks and increase our stun chance by 8% per point. We can also pick the Juggernaut ability, which increases our strength by 1 point and also offers us 4% resistances for Fire and Void. In this game, resistances are useful, especially the Void one from what I heard from the developers. However, they're not essential. They're not needed like we have in Path of Exile, where if you don't cap your resistances from mid to end game, you are pretty much dead, right? So you want to maximize those. Useful, not essential. Or we can invest in Fearless right now, which gives us 1 vitality point and increases our health regeneration by 10%. Sounds pretty good. I think to begin with, I want to invest in Overwhelm with this character, getting that 8% flat chance to stun enemies in melee, as you can see right here in the character screen. You can pause the video and read how stun is calculated, but suffice to say that normal enemies will be easier to stun. As you can see, that small circle around its head, the freezing ability is from this barbarian, it's not ours. However, bosses and mini-bosses will be a lot harder to stun, as you might expect. Not impossible, which is something that you need to keep in mind, unlike other games where bosses have immunities to stun and freezes and things like that. It's not impossible to stun them. However, you will have to invest a whole lot more in order to be able to do that, or you might have to use skills which maximizes that stun potential. I don't know about the endgame, if there are modifiers which create immunities. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but we will see in the future. For now, what we are doing is that we're going to be spending about half an hour together, just getting a feel for what the Sentinel has to offer. Then, I'm going to be spending some time off camera, off record, just leveling up about 5 to 7 levels, I'm thinking at this point, so that we can return in the next episode and we're gonna have a lot of fun spending all of the points which I've gathered, throwing in some better equipment, and get a feel for what the new power level is. At which point, we're gonna be spending another half an hour together, have some fun, make a plan for what we might want to do going forward. Then once again I'll be farming on my own, and so on and so forth until around level 35. I'm not gonna go into the end game. If you like what you see from these classes, I don't want to spoil anything for you. There will be plenty of skills for you to unlock and try out and modify, and there will be plenty of endgame items for you to discover and enjoy by yourself. So that's the whole idea for this series. That's why I felt like it needed the long intro. That's why I gathered the information, put it down in the description below, because in the second episode there will be people wondering, hey, what happened? Why has he ended the episode at level, I don't know, 10, and now all of a sudden he's at level 20, right? We've leveled up once again. We've unlocked the lunge ability, where we dash to nearby enemies and strike with our weapon. We cannot use it without a target and cost more mana the further away the target is. This is an ability which I will use because I like to have this sort of movement skills which help us get closer to ranged attackers and mages, which are very annoying for a melee fighter. So we're gonna use the lunge ability probably for a very long time. Since we've leveled up, let's invest another point into Overwhelm, increasing our melee stun chance to 16%. And let's take a look at the active skill panel. Because up here at the top, we've unlocked our first specialization slot, and we will unlock the next one at level 8, 20, 35, and 50. What do you do with specialization? Well, you take one of the active skills which you've unlocked and you can throw it over here. You can even remove it later on if that's something that you want to do. But once you throw one of these skills here, and I'm going to throw Vengeance because this is one of the skills which I want to specialize in, you can see that it opened up its very own skill tree with its very own experience bar, and you'll be able to invest points into this skill tree to modify, sometimes significantly modify the skills and how they behave. And this is really cool. At this moment, we're just gonna read the 4 nodes that are nearby our starting area to get an idea for what we can invest in, but in the future, we'll take a look at some of the other ones as well. Up at the top, we have double riposte. We can riposte an additional time after Vengeance hits an enemy, but riposte mitigates less damage. So when we're attacking an enemy, if we get hit in the next 2 seconds, we will attack back not only once, but twice. However, we're going to lose 7% of that damage mitigation. If we go to the left, we have Executioner, where Vengeance hits deal more damage against enemies that are already damaged. So once we damage an enemy, we increase the damage done to them by 12%. To the right, we have Vengeful Fighter, where Vengeance deals more damage if you are below half health. It's increased by 15% per point, and we can invest a maximum of 5 points, which means that we would do 75% more damage if we fully invest when we're under 50% health. When are we under 50% health? Well, most of the time it will be when we're fighting bosses. So getting that 75% extra damage is really powerful. Or we can go down at the bottom here with Essence of Revenge. Riposte has a chance to grant the Void Essence on hit. Void Essences last 7 seconds and grant 50% increased void damage, 15% increased melee damage, and 10% reduced stun duration. And we can have a maximum of 3 Void Essences. This is really cool. So if we attack enemies and we gather 3 Void Essences, all of a sudden we can have 45% increased void damage, 45% increased melee damage, and a 30% reduced stun duration. That is absolutely amazing, and it's not something I'm going to pick today. When tomorrow we're creating a brand new Sentinel and we're going for the Void Knight as a mastery, I think we're going to invest into this one because that 45% increased void damage is really good, plus the extra melee damage and all that. I think for right now I'm going to go into double riposte. I want this extra attack and we'll test it out. Here we have our very first boss battle. And once again, this is a good tutorial area. This enemy does everything. He's doing area of effects. He is doing like this column fire attack. He also has a rush ability. So he has all of the abilities in the book pretty much. And it's teaching you how to play, which is pretty nice. Plus, there's one extra thing that I want us to talk about, and once again, it's adding up to why I think this area has been a tutorial that the developers intentionally put in. All of the enemies which we have encountered have been doing fire damage. So when you find an item which says that it increases the fire resistances, even if you are new to the game, you can pretty easily get the idea that, hey, I should be equipping this. Since all of the enemies are doing fire damage, this could be pretty useful. I've gone through the village. I just bought a ring which gives us a bit more movement speed, picked up some quests, and now we're moving forward through the fortress gardens. I thought out the village because there's nothing impressive happening over there, so here we are. I'm not going to show equipment too much either unless we find something super impressive, but early on, what can we find that is special? +1 extra physical damage, 10 +10 to armor, nothing special. We're moving very quickly through it. However, if you find some unique items or things like that, I wouldn't mind showing it off. Who knows, fingers crossed, maybe we find something really cool. And you might have also heard me earlier saying that tomorrow I'm going to create a Void Knight. If you haven't read the description in the video, today I'm going to put out around 3 to 4 episodes as we're getting towards level 35. So will be an episode, then I'm farming, then another episode, and so on and so forth. I'm imagining that there will be around 3 to 4 episodes. And I'm going to put all of them out as today we're heading and we're using the Paladin Mastery. Tomorrow I'm going to create a brand new class and a brand new Sentinel, and it's going to be of the Void Knight Mastery. The day after that we're going for the Forge Guard Mastery. A different build. We're gonna cut everything which is from the early game, everything that we've seen from the Sentinel so far that doesn't have to do with the quote-unquote build that I'm going for when heading towards the Void Knight, right? So if I pick a skill which we haven't picked today because it has something to do with the Void Knight, I am going to show it even if it's from the early game. But it's mostly going to be focused around the Void Knight in itself. And that's why I'm saying that it's going to be around 3 to 4 episodes. This first time when we're playing the class for the first time, it's definitely going to be 4 episodes because we're going to show off a lot of the early game for that class. But in the second and the third day, when we're going for the same class but with a different mastery, I think we're going to cut out most of the early game. And we've leveled up here once again. We've gained another skill, which is pretty interesting. This one is called Rive, a combo of 3 melee attacks. Every third consecutive attack with Rive slashes in a full circle around the character, dealing double damage. And I'm not gonna use this. This is a basic attack. It has 0 mana cost. I am not gonna use this. However, I feel it's very good for a two-handed weapon, because one of the problems that we will have when using a two-handed weapon is, even though we are doing a lot more damage, we don't have a shield. We're not going to be able to protect ourselves as well. So clearing the mobs around you using a two-handed weapon can be very good. Getting that double damage, the third hit, is going to be even more useful and even more impressive. But since we've leveled up, let's throw another passive skill point here in Overwhelm. And we've also unlocked another point for the Vengeance skill. I am thinking of going either left or right. We have 2 main skills here. Perfect Riposte, where hits that you riposte cannot critically strike you. That is actually very useful. So we're using Vengeance as our basic attack. We're using most of the time. So if we can get critical strike immunity, this is going to make us really tanky. I feel like the biggest threat you have early on is actually critical strikes, because when you are getting attacked by normal attacks, most of the mobs don't represent a threat to you. You can see your health bar slowly going down and you can throw quickly a health potion, and that can be totally fine. If you get critically strike, the amount of damage, if you get 2 or 3 critical strikes, the amount of damage that you take can be absolutely fatal. Right? Especially when you encounter one of the tougher enemies. It has this quick jump in your health bar, and thus it can surprise you and kill you. So I'm thinking that this is one direction in which I want to go. If we look on the other side, we have Zealot's Technique, where we can riposte an additional time after Vengeance hits an enemy. So when we're using Vengeance and we hit an enemy, not only are we going to attack twice when we get hit, but we can attack an additional time, helping us clearing the area of some of the squishier mobs. And I really like that. However, I'm going to go to the left first, and I'll tell you why. In order to get to Perfect Riposte, we will need to invest at least 1 point into this skill, which is earlier, right? Which is connected to it. However, if we want to go to the Zealot Technique, we will have to invest 4 points into Dark Duelist. So this is a bigger investment than this one, and I think early survivability might be a whole lot more useful for us than this one. So I'm going to pick Rapid Strikes, which increases the attack speed for Vengeance. Pretty good ability to have. And then we're gonna continue forward. We don't have better gloves, nothing special there. A spear, which seems better, but I don't plan to use a spear at this moment. We'll decide tomorrow for a two-handed weapon. I might either go for a club or I might go for a sword. I don't think I'm going to go for a spear. I don't know, it doesn't appeal to me too much, at least for what I have in mind for the Void Knight. But we shall see tomorrow. Okay, that almost took us out. And here we are on the fortress walls. I like what they've done with these areas. There's a lot of changes early on. I wonder how it's going to be like. I mean, I'm doing every day, I am taking one class from the beginning of the game and I'm getting to somewhere mid-game and never going to the end game. After 15 days, after going through all of the classes and all of the mastery, I am really curious how I'll feel about these early areas. As we're playing along and we find items which will be useful for other classes, I am going to stash them and I am going to be using them with the other characters. So I'm not starting from scratch with each and every one of them. I am going to be using any kind of item, any kind of bonus that we find in order to make this early experience a whole lot quicker. Now we find another boss, and I remember this one from the early gameplays that I've had, and this one is a bit tougher than anything we've encountered so far, because when you are in melee, he's quickly casting those fire rings on the ground, he's doing very quickly also these meteor showers, he's applying a lot of pressure on us, so it's forcing you to learn how to move. But to be honest, I don't think it's really all that bad. Okay, let's stay away here. Throw some hammers at him. I'd like him to come closer to us because that Phoenix is throwing a lot of fire and is doing a lot of damage. We're very squishy right now. And there we go. We found a better club, a better weapon, which is a club. Plus 3 to melee damage, 2 health on melee hit, and 15% increased lightning damage, which doesn't matter, but the melee hits is good, right? We get an upgrade there. I think I want to use a club going forward. Since I'm investing a lot into this melee stun chance, I believe clubs have higher chances of getting modifiers that are related to stunning the enemies in melee combat. So I'm going to keep using clubs going forward. I think I want to maximize that potential. I believe I want to invest also into our shield, into defense, and I am not sure what else. We will unlock a few more skills as we're going further and further into the game, and I think it's at that point that the build is going to start to shape up. What you're going to see here is not the perfect build. This is not what this series is about. It's about us trying out all of the classes. And here is where my personal motivation is for making this sort of series. I have in total 3,000 hours in Path of Exile. I have 2,000 on Steam and 1,000 before it was on Steam. I love that game. But even though I've invested 3,000 hours into it, I have not played most of the Ascendancy classes. I've done a few builds, a few on my own, not very successful, you know, getting better and better as I've played along the years. But I've tried a lot of builds from other people, and even though they were cool, somehow I'm always returning to the same ones. I've never tried something new. And I feel like I'm losing on a big portion of the game experience by not doing that. I thought I'd be getting a bit more into it when Path of Exile decided that Path of Exile 2 will be fused with Path of Exile 1, and thus if you unlocked the class, the Ascendancy class in Path of Exile 1, then you will also have it available in Path of Exile 2. And it's at that point that I thought, okay, I'm going to get to it one of these days. But then Path of Exile decided it's going to be its very own thing, and thus it does not matter anymore. So I'm forcing myself to try out all of the classes before I commit to one myself and take to the end game and enjoy that part of it. Leveled up Vengeance once again. We're throwing a point into perfect riposte, and thus we're not taking critical strikes anymore. We have another small boss battle here. As you can see, we're doing a lot of critical strikes. The yellow text there means we're doing critical strikes, and I'm not sure exactly why I have this very high chance of doing critical strikes. But there it is. If you don't know exactly why club is lit up and why I'm seeing only certain items, I have a loot filter created, nothing too special, but I don't want to see normal items even though they would be useful this early on. I want the game to show us, like, light up one-handed maces because that's something that I want to do. I want him to show us Sentinel specific items, and I want us to show all unique set and exalted items. This is not even close to a perfect filter. I've set it up right as I got into the game. I am going to be spending some time at some point before future episodes trying to figure out how to do an even better loot filter, and maybe I'll show it off at that point. But for now, this is going to have to do. Another battle complete. And I think we're going to be... Yeah. We're gonna leave this quest here. We've gained another passive skill point. Maximize Overwhelm. Open up a new ability called Rebuke. Hold ability key to channel for up to 2 seconds. You take 80% less damage while channeling. When you stop channeling, the barrier breaks, dealing physical damage to all nearby enemies. This deals 20 additional physical damage for each hit you have received while channeling. Well, don't mind if I do. We'll try this skill out and let's try to find the mob. So I am going to be gathering this, hold Rebuke down. That is really cool. That is actually really cool. This is a skill which I wouldn't mind specializing in. But this is going to be it for today. Or no, I have to get used to this. It's a new idea. We'll talk about these skills in the next episode. But we're gonna stop here. So this is going to be it for this episode. I'm gonna start farming at this point, and we'll see each other in the next episode, which is still going to be today, as I am around level, I think at this point, around level 15. It's at that point we're gonna return in the next episode. We're gonna spend all of the points which I've gathered. We're gonna equip all the best equipment which I found so far, and we're gonna try out a new power level as we progress through the game. Hope you're enjoying it. If you do consider leaving a like, as it does help me, helps the channel grow. Subscribe if you want to keep in touch with the series and everything I do. And if you have any thoughts about how the series is going, if you have any feedback for it, let me know down in the comments below. I would be very curious to hear what you think about this idea. This in mind, thank you very much for watching, and I wish you all to have a wonderful day.